Friends, if you are looking forward to watching the super exciting, much anticipated movie Marshmallow 2025 in English, then you have landed in the perfect spot. This is going to be a complete, in-depth exploration of everything related to Marshmallow 2025 that you simply cannot miss. And hey, if you are visiting our channel for the very first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay updated with more thrilling movie updates, detailed reviews, and exclusive behind-the-scenes stories just like this one. Trust me, you wouldn't want to miss out. Now let's dive right into it. In today's video, we are going to break down what Marshmallow 2025 really is. What kind of film is it? What is its vibe? What makes it special? We are going to explore the storyline, the major themes, and the characters that bring this story to life. We will also uncover where exactly you can watch this movie. Is it going to hit theaters first, or will it land directly on a popular OTT platform? Will it be released on a satellite channel? I will give you all the possible details about where and how you can experience Marshmallow 2025 in the best possible way. But that's not all. We're also going to take a deep dive into the technical side of the film. We will talk about the hard work that went into pre-production, all the planning that was done before the cameras even started rolling. Then we'll move on to the actual filming process, how the scenes were shot, what challenges the crew might have faced, and how the filmmakers turned creative ideas into reality on set. Of course, we can't skip the post-production phase where all the magic happens with editing, visual effects, sound design, and music. Speaking of music, I will tell you about the music department, who composed the soundtrack, and how the background score adds life to the story. We will also talk numbers. Yes, the budget. How much did the makers invest in this project? Was it a high-budget spectacle, or a modest production with clever filmmaking? And once the movie is out, what are its box office expectations? Will it be a blockbuster or a quiet release? We will explore all of that. Of course, I'll walk you through the complete storyline in a quick and fun way, just enough to spark your interest without spoiling too much. I'll also share my small review of the story to give you a feel of what this movie is going to deliver in terms of entertainment, emotions, and excitement. We will also uncover some amazing facts about the making of the film that you probably haven't heard anywhere else. And let's not forget the star cast. Who's starring in the film? Which actor is playing which character? How are their performances? Did they bring something fresh and exciting to their roles? I'll tell you about each character, and how the actors have transformed themselves to bring those roles to life on the big screen. So my friends, make sure you stay with me till the very end of this video because there's a lot of fascinating and entertaining information packed in. We are going to explore, analyze, and enjoy every detail of Marshmallow 2025 together. So let's jump right in and start this exciting journey. The story of Marshmallow 2025 begins in a seemingly ordinary town where everything looks sweet, peaceful, and picture-perfect, but beneath that sugary surface something strange is brewing. Right from the opening scenes, there's an air of mystery, as small, unexplained events start to disturb the quiet lives of the townspeople. The narrative kicks off by introducing the main character, a curious and slightly awkward teenager named Max, who stumbles upon a bizarre secret that sets the entire plot into motion. The movie doesn't follow a strict, step-by-step linear path. Instead, it plays with time in a subtle but clever way. Flashbacks are scattered throughout, offering glimpses into past events that slowly build context and deepen the story as Max digs further into the strange happenings around him. The movie moves like a puzzle, with each piece falling into place at unexpected moments. The first major turning point arrives when Max discovers that the marshmallows sold in the town's famous candy factory are not ordinary marshmallows. They seem to have a life of their own, almost as if they are trying to communicate. This discovery drags him into a hidden world that exists right alongside the normal one, a world no one else seems to notice. As Max investigates further, the story begins to blend reality with fantasy, and the line between what is real and what is imagined becomes deliciously blurred. Conflict arises when Max's best friend Emma gets pulled into the strange marshmallow mystery. The candy factory's owner, who was once a beloved figure in the community, is revealed to have a dark connection to the origin of these marshmallows. The factory isn't just making candy, it's producing something much more dangerous, and the town's history is deeply entangled in the secret. Max and Emma face a series of thrilling challenges as they try to uncover the truth, with obstacles that test their courage, friendship, and trust in each other. The narrative keeps spinning with moments that shift perspective, giving us glimpses from the viewpoint of the marshmallows themselves. These sequences are playful, strange, and give the film an experimental edge, making the marshmallows feel like characters in their own right. The story never settles into a single rhythm. It jumps between suspense, adventure, and even moments of heartwarming humor, all the while hinting at deeper themes about greed, innocence, and the importance of questioning what you are told. One of the key emotional peaks hits when Max uncovers a personal connection to the factory's origins, tying his own family's past into the story's larger mystery. This twist adds weight to his mission and raises the stakes in a way that makes the adventure feel personal and urgent. As the plot rushes towards its climax, the pacing tightens, and the emotional intensity grows. Max and Emma must make a choice that could save the town, but might come at a great personal cost. The ending isn't just about defeating a villain or solving a puzzle. It's about understanding the power of stories, memories, and the strange, sticky sweetness that connects people in the most unexpected ways. Throughout the film, the narrative refuses to stick to a predictable formula. It constantly plays with the audience's expectations, weaving in and out of past and present, reality and fantasy, truth and myth, making the journey both surprising and delightfully challenging. The story unfolds like an intricate candy wrapper that, layer by layer, reveals something richer and more flavorful hidden inside. The characters in Marshmallow 2025 are far from simple. They arrive on screen looking like your typical small-town faces, but as the story stretches and twists, they begin to peel back layers you didn't expect to find. Max, the heart of the story, isn't the kind of hero who charges into action with confidence and a grand plan. He starts off as an awkward, curious teenager who feels like he's always on the outside looking in. He's a dreamer, someone who doesn't quite fit the mold his town expects him to. His obsession with figuring out the mystery is more than just curiosity. It's about belonging, about finding his place, about proving to himself that he matters in a town that sees him as ordinary. Watching Max go from hesitant to brave, from doubtful to determined, is like watching someone slowly grow into their own skin. Emma, Max's best friend, brings another dynamic to the story. She's fiercely loyal but also grounded, someone who knows when to question Max's wild theories and when to push him forward. She's not just the sidekick. Her journey is equally powerful. She struggles with fear, with the temptation to walk away from the danger, but time and again she chooses to stay, to fight alongside Max, even when the stakes climb. Her bond with Max isn't perfect. They clash, they doubt each other, but that's what makes their friendship feel real and alive. It's in those small, messy arguments and those moments of quiet trust where their characters grow the most. The factory owner, Mr. Grimsley, is another fascinating piece of this puzzle. At first glance, he appears to be the classic charming businessman with a gleaming smile and polished shoes. But as Max and Emma dig deeper, Mr. Grimsley's layers start to unfold, revealing a man who once chased dreams but became trapped by his own ambition. His motivations are not purely evil. He's driven by fear of failure, by desperation to hold on to his success, and by the belief that the ends justify the means. He's a villain who isn't just out to destroy. He's a man who made choices, each one pulling him further into darkness until he no longer recognizes the boy he used to be. Even the marshmallows themselves are oddly developed in their own way. They aren't just magical objects moving the plot along. They have their own personalities, their own strange little behaviors. Some of them seem playful, some seem rebellious, and some even appear to have memories. They don't speak, but through clever visual storytelling, they become characters that spark curiosity and bring an unpredictable energy to the story. Max's connection to them evolves throughout the film, starting as a freak accident and growing into something much more personal and emotionally tangled. The supporting characters in the town, like Max's father and the factory workers, also bring weight to the narrative. Max's father is a man closed off by grief and fear, someone who pushes Max to stay safe, to keep his head down, but over time, their relationship softens and rebuilds as the truth about the factory comes out. Their father-son bond moves from cold distance to mutual understanding, shaping some of the film's most touching moments. Every character's choices push the story forward. Their personal growth isn't just decoration. It's the engine that keeps the adventure running. Max's determination, Emma's loyalty, Grimsley's desperation, the Marshmallow's mischief. All of it weaves together to create a story that feels alive, unpredictable, and deeply connected to the characters' journeys. Their transformations feel earned, not forced, and by the time the story reaches its highest point, the characters standing at the center are not the same as the ones we met at the beginning. Their growth is messy, sometimes painful, often funny, but always rich with meaning. The performances in Marshmallow 2025 bring the story to life in a way that feels fresh, surprising, and sometimes even a little magical. The actor playing Max completely disappears into the role, capturing that perfect blend of teenage awkwardness and relentless curiosity. He doesn't play Max like a superhero or a typical chosen one character. Instead, he gives Max a quiet kind of bravery, the kind that builds slowly with each scene. He shows hesitation, fear, and self-doubt without overacting. And when Max finally steps up to face the challenges in front of him, it feels honest and hard-earned because the actor lets us see every small moment of growth along the way. His performance holds the story together, making Max someone you want to root for, even when he stumbles or makes mistakes. The actress who plays Emma is another standout. She doesn't fade into the background or play the simple supportive friend. She brings sharp timing, quick wit, and just the right amount of emotional weight to Emma's role. The way she delivers her lines feels natural, as if she's actually living the adventure instead of just acting it. Her chemistry with Max is one of the film's strongest points. They bicker, they laugh, they argue like real friends would under pressure, and their emotional moments together feel raw, especially when Emma has to make tough choices that test their loyalty to each other. She balances toughness with vulnerability, and that gives her character real depth. Then there's Mr. Grimsley, the candy factory owner, played by an actor who knows exactly how to command the screen. He starts off so charming, almost too perfect, and slowly lets cracks show in that polished exterior. His performance is layered, switching from friendly to menacing with just a slight shift in tone, or a lingering glance that makes you second-guess him. He doesn't need to shout or overplay the villain angle. Instead, he lets his calm delivery and subtle expressions create tension. His quiet intensity makes his character fascinating to watch, because you can never quite figure out what he's going to do next. His portrayal makes you believe that he's someone who genuinely thinks he's doing the right thing, which makes him all the more dangerous. Even the supporting cast brings something special to the table. Max's father is played with a tired, worn-down energy that feels deeply real. You can see the weight of the past in his eyes, and his quiet struggle to reconnect with Max is handled with care. He doesn't get big dramatic speeches, but the actor makes every silence between father and son feel like it's saying something. The factory workers, the townspeople, and even the brief appearances by characters who seem minor all feel like they belong in this world. No one feels like filler. Each actor brings something textured and believable to their role, adding little details that make the town feel alive. And then there's the strange joy of the marshmallows themselves. While obviously not played by actors, the performances tied to their movement and their presence are crafted so carefully that these little creatures develop personalities. The actors' reactions to the marshmallows sell the illusion perfectly. They look at them with wonder, fear, curiosity, and frustration, making you completely buy into the idea that these marshmallows are more than just candy. It's a combination of great acting, clever direction, and visual magic that brings these marshmallows to life as if they are genuine co-stars. What makes the performances in Marshmallow 2025 so enjoyable is that they don't feel like anyone is trying too hard to sell the story. The actors lean into the weirdness, the wonder, and the emotional core of the film without losing the heart of their characters. Whether it's the quiet moments of self-discovery, the bursts of humor, the tension-filled confrontations, or the playful scenes with living marshmallows, the cast handles it all with charm and skill. They make the story feel like more than just an adventure, they make it feel personal. The direction in Marshmallow 2025 is where the film truly finds its playful, mysterious, and slightly surreal heartbeat. The director doesn't just tell the story, the director shapes how it feels, how it moves, and how it wraps itself around the audience from the very first scene. The tone is carefully balanced, never tipping too far into pure fantasy or getting stuck in heavy drama. There's a lightness in the way the story unfolds, but just beneath that soft, candy-coated surface, there's always this gentle tension simmering, reminding you that something strange is always around the corner. The director pulls this off with a style that mixes whimsy with just enough edge to keep the story unpredictable. One of the most exciting things about the direction is how the pacing keeps shifting in ways that surprise the audience. The film doesn't race from scene to scene like it's in a hurry, but it also never drags. The director knows exactly when to slow things down, when to let the camera linger on a moment, a glance, or even a single marshmallow wiggling in the corner of a frame, creating those delicious pauses that make you lean in and wonder what's coming next. Then, without warning, the story picks up again, sweeping you into high-energy chases, frantic discoveries, or emotionally charged confrontations. The rhythm of the film feels alive, always adjusting to match the heartbeat of the story. Shot composition in this film is full of clever little details that make the world feel just slightly off in the best way. The director plays with framing to highlight how small Max feels in the beginning, often placing him at the edge of the screen or showing him surrounded by towering machines, endless rows of candy jars, and shadowy corners of the factory. As Max grows into his role, the director subtly shifts how he's framed, giving him more space, more focus, and more visual power. The marshmallows themselves are filmed with a kind of playful curiosity, often shown through extreme close-ups that make them look larger than life or through soft, glowing lighting that makes them seem almost magical. The camera isn't just there to capture the action. It's constantly adding mood, mystery, and sometimes a sense of mischief. The director's stylistic choices are where the film starts to feel really unique. There's a mix of old-fashioned storybook charm and modern cinematic energy. Sometimes scenes look like they've been dipped in pastel colors, with a softness that feels like stepping into a dream. Other times, the factory scenes crackle with sharper contrasts and cooler tones, giving the whole place a slightly eerie, secret-laden atmosphere. There's even a bit of bold experimentation, like shifting perspectives to let the audience see a scene from the marshmallow's point of view. These shifts are handled with such confidence that they never feel like gimmicks. Instead, they add layers to the experience, making the world feel playful and unpredictable. The director also knows how to use silence. There are moments where the music drops away, the dialogue stops, and all you hear is the faint rustling of wrappers, the soft hum of factory machines, or the quiet breathing of a character about to make a life-changing decision. These silent moments stretch out in a way that builds real emotional weight, letting the audience feel the tension, the wonder, or the sadness in full. Throughout the film, the director's narrative vision shines with clarity. Every scene feels like part of a carefully woven tapestry, and even the smaller, quieter moments are stitched into the story with purpose. The transitions between past and present, between fantasy and reality, are smooth and often playful, making the timeline feel like a ribbon being tied and untied in front of you. The director isn't afraid to let the story be strange, sweet, and a little surreal all at once, and that boldness gives the film its unique charm. The mood is never left to chance. It shifts and deepens under the director's careful hand, moving from curiosity to danger to heartwarming connection without losing its sense of fun. The film feels like it's always inviting the audience to explore, to question, and to enjoy the ride. And that spirit is woven into every frame, every camera angle, and every storytelling choice the director makes. The cinematography in Marshmallow 2025 does something magical. It takes an already intriguing story and wraps it in visuals that make every frame feel like it belongs in a storybook you never want to put down. The camera isn't just a tool for showing the action. It's an active storyteller, pulling you deeper into Max's world, shaping how you feel about each moment, and making even the quietest scenes glow with hidden energy. The camera angles play a big role in how the story breathes. In the beginning, Max is often filmed from above, making him look small, almost swallowed by the towering machines of the candy factory or the endless streets of his town. It's a subtle trick, but it instantly tells you that Max is a little lost, a little unsure of where he fits. As he gains confidence and the story pushes forward, the cinematography shifts, gradually leveling the camera until Max fills the frame with quiet strength. It's a visual journey that mirrors his growth without a single word needing to be spoken. Lighting is used with such precision that it practically becomes another character in the film. There are warm, golden glows in the town's sweet shops, soft afternoon sunlight pouring through dusty windows, and pale morning light that makes the marshmallows sparkle like tiny enchanted objects. These gentle touches make the town feel inviting and safe at first glance, but the cinematography doesn't stop there. When Max and Emma start uncovering the darker side of the factory's secrets, the lighting changes, cooling down with harsh blues and sterile whites that make the once magical factory feel cold and clinical. Shadows stretch longer, factory halls feel more confined, and the light seems to flicker just a little too much, always keeping you on edge. This shift in lighting is a quiet but powerful way of showing that things are no longer as sweet as they once seemed. Framing is used with creativity and flair. There are moments when the camera pulls in tight, focusing on the soft, bouncy texture of the marshmallows, making them look almost alive. These close-up shots don't just show the objects, they give them a pulse, a presence. The wide shots are equally important, often placing Max and Emma in the middle of vast, candy-filled spaces, emphasizing how overwhelming and surreal their adventure is. In some key scenes, the cinematography plays with symmetry and reflections, creating stunning visual patterns that make the world feel slightly off balance, reminding you that things in this story are never quite what they seem. There are a few visually striking moments that burn themselves into memory. One standout is when Max first follows the trail of glowing marshmallows through the factory at night. The only light source is the faint, almost otherworldly glow of the marshmallows, casting soft blue light that dances on the walls and across Max's face. It's a quiet scene, but it crackles with curiosity and tension, using light and shadow to create an atmosphere that feels part fairy tale, part mystery. Another unforgettable shot comes during a scene where Max and Emma are standing on a high factory platform, overlooking the swirling machinery below. The camera pulls back in a slow sweeping arc, showing the tiny silhouettes of the two friends against a storm of moving gears and conveyor belts, making them look like small figures caught in a much larger story. The cinematography also plays with movement in a way that feels playful and immersive. There are moments where the camera tracks the marshmallows as they bounce, roll, and tumble through the factory, almost as if the camera itself is joining in on their mischief. These dynamic shots add bursts of energy, breaking up the tension and pulling the audience right into the candy-coated chaos. The cinematographer's choices shape the mood with precision, always knowing when to soften, when to sharpen, when to zoom in, and when to pull away. Every visual decision seems to ask the audience to look closer, to pay attention to the smallest details, because in this story, the smallest details often hold the biggest secrets. The cinematography doesn't just capture the story, it wraps it in color, light, movement, and texture, turning each scene into something that feels alive, something you don't just watch but experience. The editing in Marshmallow 2025 plays like a carefully orchestrated rhythm, always adjusting its beat to match the mood of the moment. It's not the kind of editing that demands attention with flashy cuts or rapid scene changes. Instead, it finds a natural pulse that carries the story smoothly from one moment to the next, making the film feel like it's breathing in time with the characters. The transitions are often seamless, slipping from scene to scene with a gentle touch that keeps the viewer completely absorbed. Early in the film, the editing takes its time, allowing the audience to settle into Max's world. Scenes breathe, conversations linger, and the camera holds just a few seconds longer on small gestures or quiet spaces. These slower rhythms let the emotional foundation settle in without feeling like the story is dragging. It's a soft build-up, like the film is carefully stacking its marshmallows one by one, waiting for the right moment to topple them. When the story starts to twist and the factory's secrets begin to unravel, the pacing shifts just enough to keep the audience leaning forward. The edits become quicker but never rushed. There's an energy that builds as Max and Emma race through discoveries, but the editing always knows when to pause for a breath. Just when the tension is about to peak, the film pulls back, letting a moment of silence or a quiet reaction hold the screen, giving emotional weight to the smallest choices. It's this balance between motion and stillness that gives the film its charm. The editor knows exactly when to hit the gas and when to coast, creating a rhythm that never grows tiresome or repetitive. One of the editing highlights is how it handles the film's playful shifts between past and present. Flashbacks are woven in with clever, almost invisible transitions. Sometimes the movement of a marshmallow will lead straight into a memory, or the sound of a factory machine will pull the scene into a different time without breaking the flow. These smooth shifts give the story a magical, dreamlike quality, where time seems flexible and the past and present feel like they're sitting right next to each other. The editing never makes these moments feel confusing or forced. Instead, it invites the audience to drift between timelines effortlessly. There's also a fantastic use of pacing when the film dips into the marshmallow's perspective. These quirky, energetic sequences play with faster cuts, playful angles, and bursts of quick edits that perfectly match the mischievous, bouncy personalities of the marshmallows themselves. These moments shake up the rhythm in the best way, adding unexpected jolts of energy that keep the story lively and fun without pulling it off track. The rhythm of the film becomes a language of its own. When the editing slows down, it's like the story is asking the audience to listen closely, to pay attention to the quiet things that might be important later. When the editing picks up, it's like the story is nudging the audience forward, pulling them into the chase, into the puzzle, into the adventure. The cuts are never just there to move things along. They are part of the emotional fabric of the film. They decide when to build tension, when to let moments linger, when to push the characters into motion, and when to let them stand still with their thoughts. The pacing works hand in hand with the editing to shape the audience's experience from start to finish. It never feels like the film is sprinting to the end or dragging its feet through filler. Instead, it finds this perfect in-between space where the story feels full, textured, and constantly moving with purpose. Whether the scenes are playful, intense, or quietly emotional, the editing makes sure every beat lands exactly where it should, keeping the audience engaged and connected all the way through. The soundtrack and score of Marshmallow 2025 wrap around the story like the perfect layer of sweetness and surprise, always present but never overpowering. The music feels like it belongs to the world of the film, as if the marshmallows themselves could hum along to it. Right from the opening scene, the score sets the tone with soft, whimsical melodies that feel light and curious, like a playful invitation to step into something just a little bit magical. The composer weaves in gentle woodwinds, soft strings, and tinkling chimes that create a feeling of wonder without shouting for attention. The music drifts in and out of scenes like a secret companion, guiding the audience without ever pulling them away from the moment. One of the most delightful choices in the soundtrack is the use of recurring musical motifs that quietly stitch the story together. There's a particular melody tied to Max's journey, a tune that begins as something simple and almost hesitant, played softly in the background when Max is exploring alone. As his confidence builds and the mystery deepens, that same melody grows fuller, richer, layered with new instruments, until by the film's most intense moments, it has transformed into something bold and unforgettable. It's not just a theme, it becomes a musical reflection of Max's growth, sneaking into different parts of the story in clever, subtle ways. Emma has her own softer motif, one that plays during moments of friendship and decision, and when their stories collide at key turning points, their musical themes twist together in a way that feels seamless and satisfying. The candy factory itself is given its own sound palette. The factory scenes pulse with a low, rhythmic hum, a mix of playful xylophone taps and soft mechanical beats that make the factory feel alive, almost like it's breathing. The music here is filled with curiosity, but as Max and Emma begin to uncover the darker secrets buried inside, the factory's soundtrack shifts. That cheerful rhythm grows uneasy, layered with eerie strings and distant metallic echoes, adding a quiet tension that creeps under the skin without ever exploding into dramatic bursts. It's a brilliant touch because the music lets the audience feel the shift before the characters fully understand what's changing. Silence is another tool the composer and sound designers use with precision. There are key moments where the music simply steps aside, letting the absence of sound do the heavy lifting. These moments of silence often stretch just a little longer than expected, making the smallest sounds, footsteps, a heartbeat, the rustle of a marshmallow bag, feel amplified and important. When the soundtrack drops away, it isn't empty. It's charged with anticipation, forcing the audience to lean in, to feel the weight of the scene without being told how to feel. One standout example is a scene where Max stands alone in the factory, staring at something he's not sure he understands. The silence is absolute. No score, no sound effects, just Max's breathing and the faint, distant creak of the factory walls. It's a moment that lands with incredible power, because the silence says everything. The music also knows how to play when the marshmallows are in motion. Their scenes are often paired with bouncy, mischievous tunes that match their unpredictable energy. The score skips and tumbles along with them, using fast, playful rhythms that bring a spark of humor and chaos without ever slipping into silliness. It's this careful balance that keeps the soundtrack feeling light, but emotionally grounded. The soundtrack and score never fight for attention. They blend into the story's fabric so naturally that you might not even notice how much they're guiding your emotions until you step back and realize how deeply the music has shaped your connection to the characters. The score is playful when it needs to be, soft when it matters, tense when the story leans into danger, and tender when the emotions rise to the surface. Every note feels like it belongs to this strange, sweet world, making the music an essential part of the film's magic. Marshmallow 2025 dives into its world with a story that feels light and playful on the surface, but beneath all the bouncing marshmallows and colorful candy-coated settings, it's bubbling with deeper themes that give the film its real weight. One of the strongest ideas running through the story is the theme of curiosity versus comfort. Max is a character who could have easily stayed in his familiar world, surrounded by sweet shops, safe streets, and the predictable rhythm of small-town life. But the film constantly pushes the question, what happens when curiosity pulls you beyond what's comfortable? Max's relentless need to know, to understand the strange life of these marshmallows and the secrets of the factory, drives the entire plot. The film explores how curiosity can be a force for discovery, but also something that comes with risks and sacrifices. The story also speaks loudly about the cost of ambition and greed, especially through the character of Mr. Grimsley. His factory is built on more than just candy. It's built on secrets, shortcuts, and the desire to create something extraordinary without thinking about the consequences. Grimsley's journey shows how ambition can twist into obsession, how something that starts with good intentions can quietly become something harmful. It's a theme that lingers throughout the story, showing that chasing success without balance can lead to choices that consume not just the person chasing it, but everything around them. Another powerful thread is the idea of friendship and trust. Max and Emma's bond is tested at every turn. Their friendship isn't painted as perfect. They argue, they doubt each other, they stumble, but their loyalty is what keeps pulling them back together. The film digs into what it means to truly trust someone, especially when the world starts throwing impossible situations at you. The moments where Max has to choose between protecting a secret or protecting Emma hit with real emotional weight. Trust becomes a living, shifting thing in the story, never simple, always earned. Memory and family are also gently woven into the film's message. Max's connection to his father is not a loud, dramatic arc, but it quietly shapes the story's emotional core. Their distant relationship reflects how grief and unspoken feelings can create walls that seem impossible to climb. The marshmallows, strange as they are, become part of Max's journey to understand his family's past and rebuild those lost connections. The story suggests that sometimes the things we've pushed aside, the small memories, the half-forgotten stories, are exactly where we find the strength to move forward. The marshmallows themselves carry their own layered meaning. On the surface, they are playful, magical, and mysterious, but as the story unfolds, they become symbols of the unexpected life hidden inside the ordinary. They challenge Max's understanding of what's real, what's valuable, and what stories are worth believing. The film plays with the idea that magic isn't always about grand spells or glowing objects. It's often tucked inside the small, overlooked things we pass by every day. The film also quietly nudges at the theme of questioning authority and not blindly accepting what you're told. The townspeople adore the factory, they believe in its charm, and they trust Grimsley's version of the story. Max's journey is about peeling back those polished layers to find the uncomfortable truth underneath. It's a message about digging deeper, about not settling for the easy answers, and about understanding that even the sweetest surfaces can hide something much more complicated. What makes the themes in Marshmallow 2025 stick is that they aren't delivered in heavy-handed speeches or obvious lessons. They unfold naturally through the characters' choices, through the quiet moments, through the tension that simmers under the playful adventure. The story never forces its ideas. It lets them grow organically, inviting the audience to think, to question, and to feel. Even when the credits roll, the questions about ambition, curiosity, trust, and the hidden magic in the everyday still linger, leaving something sweet and thoughtful behind. The visual effects in Marshmallow 2025 are sprinkled throughout the film like carefully placed bits of magic, always present but never overwhelming the story. The CGI is handled with a light touch, blending seamlessly into the world, so that it feels like a natural extension of the environment rather than something pasted on top of it. The marshmallows themselves are the real stars of the visual effects department. They bounce, wiggle, glow, and move with such charm and believability that it's easy to forget they're computer-generated. They don't feel out of place in the factory or on the quiet streets of Max's town. They interact with the physical world in a way that looks tactile. They press into hands, tumble off tables, and leave tiny sticky trails that seem perfectly real. The animators have given them just enough quirky movement to make them feel alive, but stopped short of turning them into cartoon characters. The marshmallows float somewhere between the realistic and the fantastical, which is exactly what makes them so captivating. The film smartly uses practical effects alongside CGI to keep things grounded. Whenever possible, the filmmakers lean into physical props, real sets, and tangible materials. The Candy Factory is not a green screen heavy fantasy space. It's a detailed, functional environment filled with conveyor belts, churning machines, and rows of shiny jars that actually exist. This gives the actors something real to touch and interact with, which helps sell the illusion when the CGI marshmallows come tumbling into those spaces. The moments where practical effects and CGI meet are handled with such precision that it's hard to spot the seams. The marshmallows bounce across real conveyor belts, drop into real tubs of syrup, and roll along real wooden floors. These touches make the digital elements feel like part of the same physical world. One of the most visually stunning effects comes during a sequence where Max and Emma chase a trail of glowing marshmallows through the twisting corridors of the factory at night. The marshmallows leave behind a faint, shimmering glow that lights their path. The glow isn't loud or overly bright, it's soft, pulsing, and seems to cling to the edges of the frame. The effect is so subtle and beautifully done that it enhances the mystery without screaming for attention. It's a perfect example of how the visual effects support the story rather than distract from it. The film doesn't overload itself with big, flashy CGI set pieces. Instead, it uses smaller, more intimate effects that feel connected to the characters and the story. There are moments where the marshmallows pulse with light, where they seem to react to Max's emotions. And those moments are often blended with soft practical lighting and carefully timed camera work to make the illusion more convincing. The restraint in using visual effects is part of what makes them so effective. The filmmakers trust the world they've built and only use CGI to gently push the boundaries of that world rather than explode it into something unrecognizable. There are a few key scenes where the visual effects step forward with more flair, like when the factory's machines begin to malfunction in spectacular, candy-coated chaos. The gears spin wildly, conveyor belts whip through the air, and marshmallows bounce in impossible directions. In these moments, the CGI steps into the spotlight, but even then, it holds onto a sense of playful control. The effects never feel like they're trying to dazzle just for the sake of it. They always serve the story's quirky tone and Max's frantic point of view. What's most impressive is how the CGI never feels cold or synthetic. The marshmallows aren't just digital blobs, they have texture, softness, and a kind of stickiness that makes them feel oddly huggable. The animators have given them tiny quirks, little hesitations in their movements, playful twitches, that bring them to life without needing them to speak or grow cartoon faces. This attention to detail keeps them rooted in the world, and helps maintain the film's magical, grounded vibe. The balance between practical and digital effects is where the film truly shines. The physical sets and props give weight to the environment, while the CGI adds just the right sprinkle of magic to elevate the ordinary into something extraordinary. The visual effects in Marshmallow 2025 don't just decorate the film, they quietly build its atmosphere, push the story forward, and give the marshmallows their own peculiar, unforgettable life. The set design and locations in Marshmallow 2025 are the secret ingredient that makes the film's world feel like it's always just one step away from a daydream. The production design doesn't settle for creating ordinary places. It builds a town and a factory that feel like they've been carefully handcrafted to hold stories in every corner. Max's hometown isn't some overly stylized fantasy village. It's a place that feels real, but with just enough peculiar detail to hint that something magical could be hiding there. The streets are lined with cozy little shops that seem to have been frozen in time, their candy jars stacked in perfectly uneven rows, the hand-painted signs slightly faded but still proud. The town square is small and warm, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, but there's always a sense that maybe they don't know everything. Max's home is a quiet, lived-in space filled with soft colors, slightly cluttered shelves, and corners that whisper about untold stories. The family kitchen is worn but welcoming, with cracked tiles and a table that's seen years of breakfasts, arguments, and half-finished projects. These details pull the audience in, making it feel like a place you could actually step into, a home that holds weight even when the story pulls Max into far stranger places. The real marvel, though, is the candy factory. The set design inside the factory is a playground of visual delights. It's not a sleek, modern factory full of steel and glass. Instead, it's a maze of old wooden beams, churning brass gears, hand-cranked machines, and conveyor belts that twist like ribbons. The factory feels like it was built by a candy maker who never quite let go of his imagination. The walls are stacked with towering shelves filled with mysterious jars, glowing syrups, and bags of sugar that seem to shimmer ever so slightly under the factory lights. The machines feel both magical and mechanical, as though they could run forever, but might fall apart at any moment if someone pulls the wrong lever. The spaces inside the factory aren't neat. There are hidden tunnels, crooked staircases, and little rooms where forgotten machines sit quietly gathering dust. Every corner feels like it has a secret waiting to be found, and the set design invites the characters and the audience to explore, to notice the small things, to wonder about what might be lurking just out of sight. Even the props add to this sense of discovery. The jars of marshmallows are never perfectly lined up. They tilt and lean, they catch the light in strange ways, they sit next to strange tools and old factory blueprints that seem to tell stories without a single word spoken. The way the locations are used in the film adds layers to the storytelling. When Max and Emma wander the town, the spaces feel open but somehow unfinished, as if the town is holding its breath. When they're in the factory, the spaces tighten, the ceilings feel lower, the walls closer, creating a feeling that the factory itself is alive and watching. The shifts between wide-open streets and the cramped, winding factory halls aren't just visual changes. They reflect Max's journey from the familiar into the unknown. There's also something brilliant about how the film never over-decorates its spaces. It lets small details do the heavy lifting. A worn sign, a dented machine, a marshmallow stuck where it shouldn't be. These little touches make the world feel real, not polished. Even when the story edges into the magical, the sets stay grounded, which keeps the fantasy believable. The factory's control room is another standout. It's a cluttered nest of levers, dials, and glowing buttons, with paper scattered everywhere and strange little tools hanging from the walls. It feels like a place that's been running on memory as much as machinery, a perfect symbol of the factory's decaying charm. Even when the film shifts into more intense moments, the set design keeps delivering surprises. A hidden storage room packed with glowing crates, a forgotten marshmallow testing chamber filled with dusty equipment, a small office where Grimsley keeps secrets tucked between candy catalogs. The locations in Marshmallow 2025 never feel like simple backdrops. They feel alive, like they're participating in the story, holding pieces of the mystery in their floors, walls, and forgotten corners. The production design doesn't just build places. It builds moods, questions, and a deep sense of curiosity. Every room, every street, every prop feels like it's been there long before the story began, waiting for someone like Max to finally come along and notice what everyone else has been too busy to see. The dialogue in Marshmallow 2025 flows with a rhythm that feels fresh, lively, and often surprisingly heartfelt. It doesn't sound like movie characters reading carefully polished lines. It sounds like people talking the way people actually do when they're caught between curiosity and chaos, when they're scared, when they're trying to figure each other out. The script finds a way to mix sharp, playful banter with quiet emotional punches, balancing humor and heart in a way that keeps the conversations always worth listening to. Max and Emma's exchanges are some of the film's most engaging moments. Their dialogue feels natural, full of quick comebacks, awkward pauses, and those little half-sentences where someone changes their mind mid-thought. They tease each other, they argue in that messy way best friends do, and they also have those raw, simple moments where their words stumble because they're saying something that really matters. The script never pushes them to be overly clever or forced. Their conversations feel like they've been having them for years, filled with inside jokes and unfinished thoughts that only make sense to them. The film sneaks in plenty of witty lines, especially in the way Emma challenges Max's wild theories. She has this perfect way of undercutting his grand ideas with just a few words, and Max's desperate attempts to explain himself always lead to fast, funny exchanges that feel like they belong to these characters, and not to a writer trying too hard to be funny. But the script doesn't rely only on the humor. It knows when to slow down and let words carry emotional weight. There are moments where the silence between lines says as much as the words themselves. When Max and his father finally start to talk about their family's past, the dialogue drops into a quieter, more careful space. It's simple, no dramatic speeches, just a few words carefully chosen, and even more carefully heard. The pauses between them land with real impact because the script trusts the audience to sit in that space without rushing. Mr. Grimsley's dialogue adds another layer entirely. He's smooth, polished, always speaking in circles that sound comforting but feel just a little too neat. His lines are filled with that kind of soft manipulation where what's left unsaid matters just as much as what's spoken. He tells stories that almost sound like fairy tales, but there's always something lurking just behind his carefully chosen words. His promises about the factory's magic are delivered in such a calm, confident tone that you can understand why the townspeople believe him. But the way his words land always keeps you questioning. The script makes him feel dangerous not because he shouts or threatens, but because he talks like a man who absolutely believes his version of the story is the right one. There are standout lines scattered throughout the film, not because they are big, quotable slogans, but because they stick quietly in the mind. Emma's line, "Sometimes the smallest things get left behind because everyone's too busy looking for the big stuff," feels like it carries the entire heart of the film. Max's moment when he says, "What if the things we think are accidents are just waiting for someone to notice them?" hangs in the air long after he says it. These lines aren't flashy, but they dig in deep and feel like they've always belonged in this world. The script also finds ways to let the marshmallows become part of the conversation, even though they never speak. Through clever writing and the way characters talk about them, the marshmallows develop a strange presence in the dialogue. Max and Emma argue over what the marshmallows are trying to tell them. They talk to the marshmallows as if they can hear, and the way they phrase their questions and observations brings these little creatures to life without giving them voices. The writing never feels like it's trying to be more than it needs to be. It doesn't chase big, overly dramatic lines. It stays with the characters, lets them speak the way they would in these moments, and that's why it works. The humor feels effortless, the emotional beats land without being announced, and the dialogue carries the perfect mix of charm, tension, and depth. The script is playful when it should be, careful when it needs to be, and always leaves just enough unsaid to keep the audience leaning forward, waiting to hear what comes next. Marshmallow 2025 walks into its genre with a quiet grin, fully aware of what's expected but never quite interested in playing by all the usual rules. On the surface, it feels like a classic adventure with a splash of family mystery and a sprinkle of fantasy, but the way it unfolds never slips into the usual predictable patterns. The film plays with the structure of a coming-of-age story, but instead of throwing Max into a big, loud, world-ending quest, it pulls the adventure in close, keeps it personal, keeps it strange, and builds its stakes out of trust, curiosity, and small but meaningful discoveries. It sidesteps the usual save-the-world urgency, and instead focuses on saving something much quieter. Memories, friendships, and the hidden magic in overlooked places. The genre would typically be stuffed with flashy, action-heavy set pieces, but this film chooses to dial that back. Sure, there are exciting chases through twisting factory corridors and tense escapes from malfunctioning candy machines, but the action is always grounded in the characters' emotions. It's not about explosions or ticking clocks. It's about what's at stake for Max and Emma personally. The film knows when to pulse with energy, and when to let moments sit in their own tension. It doesn't race from one beat to the next like many adventure films. It lingers just enough to let the humor breathe and the suspense slowly build, which gives the story a much richer rhythm. The humor here is where the film quietly subverts expectations. It never relies on loud, over-the-top jokes or slapstick comedy. Instead, the humor sneaks in through the characters' quick, honest reactions to increasingly bizarre situations. The marshmallows themselves bring a natural dose of playful chaos, but they aren't just there to deliver laughs. Their presence challenges the characters, creates surprises, and often brings the story to its most thoughtful moments. The humor works because it feels earned and completely tied to the world rather than feeling like it's been pasted on top to fill a quota. In terms of fantasy, the film doesn't follow the typical formula of introducing elaborate magical systems or ancient prophecies. The marshmallows aren't explained through long-winded lore dumps or science fiction jargon. They just exist, mysterious, alive, and quietly magical. The film trusts the audience to be comfortable with the unknown, which gives the story a fresh feel. It plays with fantasy elements but refuses to lock them into a rigid explanation. This choice to leave some questions unanswered gives the story its charm, and allows the mystery to linger long after the film ends. The suspense is handled with a light but steady touch. There aren't shadowy villains waiting around every corner, but there's a growing sense of unease that builds as Max and Emma dig deeper into the factory's secrets. The film leans into psychological tension rather than constant physical danger. Mr. Grimsley's calm, polished authority creates suspense in subtle ways. He's not chasing the heroes with armies or gadgets. He's pressuring them with charm, half-truths, and perfectly reasonable-sounding promises that feel just a little too good to trust. This choice pulls the suspense away from the usual chase-and-hide game, and focuses instead on emotional decisions, trust, and personal risk. When the story hits its emotional beats, it never feels like a typical family drama where everything is wrapped up neatly with speeches and hugs. The emotional moments arrive in unexpected spaces, in the pauses between arguments, in quiet discoveries, in the way Max and his father exchange words that mean more than they say. The film doesn't chase big tearjerker scenes. It stays grounded, and because it does, the emotions feel sharper, more real. The film's genre balance feels carefully crafted. It holds adventure, humor, suspense, and gentle fantasy all in the same hand without letting one overpower the others. Where most films in this space might follow familiar blueprints, Marshmallow 2025 builds its own small, peculiar map and invites the audience to follow it at a more thoughtful pace. It introduces just enough weirdness to feel new, avoids the obvious cliches, and creates a world where magic is quiet, danger is subtle, and sometimes the greatest adventure is simply choosing to see what everyone else has missed. Marshmallow 2025 carries its social and cultural commentary with a quiet, almost sneaky confidence. It doesn't plant a flag and shout about its messages, but they are layered throughout the story in ways that feel natural, thoughtful, and sometimes even a little uncomfortable when you start paying attention. The film's biggest cultural reflection centers around the idea of corporate trust, and how communities can be charmed into believing in something simply, because it's always been there. Mr. Grimsley's Candy Factory is more than a setting. It's a symbol of how big businesses can hide their secrets behind carefully curated images of tradition and nostalgia. The townspeople love the factory, they rely on it, and they defend it without question because it has become part of their identity. It's that subtle warning about how dangerous it can be when a corporation becomes so deeply woven into a town's life that people stop asking questions. The film doesn't swing a hammer to make this point. It simply shows how easy it is to fall into comfort, and how hard it is to challenge something that's always presented as good. The story also taps into the pressure of legacy and the weight of expectations, especially through Max's relationship with his father and the lingering shadow of the family's past. The cultural pressure to follow in the footsteps of previous generations sits heavily on Max's shoulders. It's a quiet but sharp commentary on how families can pass down unspoken responsibilities, sometimes without realizing it. The way Max fights to carve his own path, to question what he's been handed, becomes a gentle push against the idea that you must simply accept the stories you've inherited. The film doesn't treat this rebellion as reckless. It presents it as necessary, as a way of growing beyond the quiet traps that tradition can sometimes create. There's also an interesting thread about consumerism woven into the candy-coated visuals of the story. The marshmallows themselves start as delightful, marketable objects. They're fun, they sparkle, they bounce, they're irresistible. But the more Max and Emma dig, the more they realize that what's being sold isn't always what it seems. The film quietly pokes at the way products can be carefully designed to distract us, to pull us in with sweetness while hiding the cost of their creation. It's not an aggressive attack on consumer culture, but it gently pushes the audience to think about what's behind the things we so easily consume. The story also touches on the idea of how communities willingly ignore uncomfortable truths. The townspeople's blind devotion to the factory feels like a quiet echo of how societies often look the other way when questioning something might cost them stability or comfort. It's a subtle, but powerful commentary on collective denial. How whole groups can choose not to see what's right in front of them, because facing it would mean disrupting their safe little world. The film handles these ideas with care. It doesn't beat the audience over the head with lessons or stop the story to deliver heavy-handed speeches. Instead, the social commentary is baked into the world, into the way characters behave, into what they choose to ignore, and into what they are finally forced to confront. Even the marshmallows become part of this layered message. They're symbols of wonder, but also symbols of how even the sweetest things can carry hidden consequences. The way the film approaches complex topics like corporate influence, inherited responsibility, and consumer blindness feels carefully balanced. It never feels like the filmmakers are using the story as a soapbox. It feels like these ideas grew naturally out of the world they created. They make the audience think without snapping them out of the adventure. The questions stay tucked into the corners of the film, ready for the audience to find if they want to dig deeper. Even when the film brushes against the edges of these big social questions, it always circles back to the small, personal choices. How one boy's curiosity can shift the way an entire community sees the truth. How a simple question can start to unravel years of comfortable silence. The cultural commentary lands because it's threaded through the details, through the characters, and through the little cracks in the factory's polished surface. It lingers because the film trusts the audience to notice. Marshmallow 2025 pulls its audience in with this gentle, almost playful grip that doesn't let go. And the way it connects emotionally is one of its most surprising strengths. It's not the kind of film that waves its arms to demand big reactions, but it finds a way to quietly stir something deeper. The laughs come naturally, not because the film forces punchlines, but because the situations unfold in ways that are genuinely funny. The marshmallows, with their bouncy, unpredictable antics, spark these light, honest moments of joy, especially when Max and Emma try desperately to keep up with the chaos. Their confused reactions, awkward rescues, and whispered arguments about what to do next feel so grounded that the humor sneaks up and lands exactly where it should. The film's wit is woven into the characters' personalities, making the audience smile not just at what's happening, but at how much these characters feel like real people reacting to something completely out of their control. But where the film really surprises is in how it hits the emotional beats. There are these quiet moments between Max and his father that feel raw and unpolished. When Max finally dares to ask the questions he's been carrying for so long, the weight of those silences between sentences pulls the audience right into the center of that emotional tension. There's no need for big, dramatic music or teary-eyed speeches. The simplicity of those moments makes them hit harder. The film knows exactly how to make the smallest gestures, a glance, a shrug, a quiet, "I didn't know," feel enormous. Those are the moments that stick, that invite the audience to reflect on their own relationships, and the things they've left unsaid. There's a real spark of excitement threaded through the adventure sequences, especially when Max and Emma start to uncover the factory's layers. The pacing of these scenes pulls the audience right into the heart of the chase, the discovery, and the mystery. It's not about high-speed escapes or explosive showdowns. It's about racing through tight corridors, decoding half-hidden messages, and feeling the pulse of the factory's strange, living rhythm. The excitement is more about curiosity and tension than pure spectacle, but it keeps the audience leaning forward, eager to find out what's tucked around the next corner. The film also knows how to deliver moments of shock, not in the jump scare way, but in the way the story reveals its quiet betrayals and hidden truths. There are small, perfectly timed reveals where what seemed sweet and harmless suddenly takes on a sharper edge. These moments are crafted to ripple through the audience, not with loud shocks, but with the kind of quiet realizations that make you shift in your seat and rethink everything you've just seen. The surprise comes from how easily the characters, and the audience, have accepted certain things without question. This is the kind of film that sticks in the back of your mind long after it's over. It invites the audience to keep thinking about the factory, about the marshmallows, about what it really means to chase the truth in a world that's happy to cover it up with sugar and smiles. It leaves little crumbs of mystery that practically dare you to go back and watch it again, to see if you missed something in the corners, to catch the quiet clues that were sitting there all along. Marshmallow 2025 doesn't beg for repeat viewings, but it earns them. The way the story holds back just enough, the way the characters' choices feel layered, the way the factory seems to hold more secrets than even Max discovers. It all lingers in a way that makes people want to come back, not just to rewatch, but to re-experience. It sparks conversations about trust, about curiosity, about whether the factory was ever really the whole story. It's the kind of film that feels light and sweet on the surface but leaves the audience with just enough questions, just enough emotional weight, to keep them thinking, talking, and quietly smiling about it long after they've left the theater. When you stack Marshmallow 2025 next to other adventure fantasy films that circle around young protagonists, quirky mysteries, and whimsical worlds, it holds its own with a very distinct flavor. It doesn't try to chase the giant, world-saving stakes of something like the Spiderwick Chronicles or Percy Jackson. It also doesn't lean fully into the darker, surreal tones of films like Coraline or A Series of Unfortunate Events. Instead, it carves out this quieter, more personal space where the adventure feels small in scale but rich in detail. A story that hums along with curiosity instead of shouting for attention. Unlike many films that drop young characters into chaotic fantasy worlds where they instantly accept the magic around them, Marshmallow 2025 takes its time. It lets its characters doubt, question, hesitate. Max doesn't immediately leap into believing that sentient marshmallows exist. He stumbles, argues, and spends a good chunk of the story wrestling with whether what he's seeing is real. That patience with the character's emotional journey gives this film an edge over others that rush through setup just to get to the spectacle. It also distances itself from the more formulaic kid-centric adventure films that tend to pack in force villains and overly neat resolutions. The story here is far more about uncovering quiet lies, slowly peeling back layers of comfort, and finding that the most dangerous thing isn't a monster or an evil wizard. It's the sweet, familiar places that convince you everything's fine when it isn't. Where many similar films rely on clear-cut heroes and villains, Marshmallow 2025 sits in a more interesting space where trust is the puzzle, and the lines between good and bad blur just enough to make you think. If you drop it next to films like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the comparisons are almost unavoidable. Both center around candy factories, both introduce young characters into mysterious, larger-than-life spaces, and both hint at the hidden dangers of greed and curiosity. But where Charlie and the Chocolate Factory leans into exaggerated fantasy, sharp moral lessons, and wild visual set pieces, Marshmallow 2025 pulls everything back to something more subtle, more grounded. It's less about creating visual overload and more about inviting the audience to explore the small things, the quiet corners, the secrets tucked behind dusty shelves. Compared to films that dive into the mystery adventure space like The Goonies, Marshmallow 2025 operates on a much smaller, more intimate scale. It doesn't rely on a group of wild, fast-talking friends tearing through obstacle courses. It keeps its focus tight on Max and Emma's evolving friendship, and their slow realization that their town isn't quite what they thought. The treasure they're chasing isn't gold or jewels. It's the truth, the unraveling of a story that's been glossed over by generations. If you put it side by side with something like Paddington, another story that mixes sweetness, humor, and gentle social commentary, you can feel a similar warmth in tone, but Marshmallow 2025 leans further into quiet mystery. It doesn't go for the same wide-open charm as Paddington, but instead wraps itself in a little more ambiguity and layered storytelling. When you look at where Marshmallow 2025 might sit within the director's work, especially if they're known for small, character-driven stories with whimsical touches, this film feels like a natural evolution. It might carry echoes of earlier works that explored family, curiosity, and lightly magical spaces, but this film feels like the director stepping into slightly bolder territory. The pacing is more confident, the emotional threads are richer, and the playful elements are more tightly woven into the heart of the story rather than sitting as side decorations. Where other films in this space might feel satisfied sticking to the formula. Big discovery, chase sequence, lesson learned, Marshmallow 2025 lingers in the spaces in between. It chooses to spend time on the quiet hallway conversations, the small hesitations, the tension that comes from realizing you might not know the people around you as well as you thought. It resists the urge to build everything into a spectacle, and instead trusts that the emotional beats, the quirky world, and the layered mystery are enough to keep the audience leaning in. It's not a film that reinvents the genre, but it confidently reshapes it just enough to stand out. It offers something that feels fresher than most formula-driven stories, something that respects curiosity, subtlety, and the importance of letting a little magic remain unexplained. Marshmallow 2025 weaves its symbolism and metaphors into the story with such a delicate touch that many of them might glide right past on a first viewing, only to rise to the surface later like little bubbles of meaning that won't quite pop. The marshmallows themselves are the clearest and most persistent metaphor in the film. On the surface, they're playful, squishy, and strange, but they carry the weight of what gets overlooked. They are soft, silent, seemingly insignificant things, and yet they hold secrets, they carry history, and they become the key to unlocking the factory's quiet mystery. They stand in for the forgotten, the dismissed, the small details that everyone is too busy to see. The marshmallows aren't just quirky creatures. They're the physical reminder that sometimes the things we write off as unimportant are where the real stories hide. Throughout the film, there's a recurring image of jars. They appear everywhere, lined up in the candy shop windows, stacked in dusty corners of the factory, tucked into Max's home filled with old memories. The jars become a visual echo of containment, of holding things in, of preserving what's sweet but also what's unresolved. They quietly symbolize how people store away their feelings, their regrets, and their questions, keeping them sealed and untouched for years. The way the marshmallows are kept in jars at the beginning of the story, trapped and displayed like decorations, ties directly to the idea of bottling up curiosity and truths that are safer left unexplored. As Max begins to challenge what he's been told, those jars start to shatter, literally and metaphorically, signaling the breaking open of old stories and long-buried memories. The factory itself stands as a towering metaphor for controlled narratives. On the outside, it's polished, charming, and carefully designed to keep people smiling. But beneath its surface, it's layered, unpredictable, and full of concealed paths. The way the factory seems to twist and shift as Max and Emma explore it speaks to how institutions can hide uncomfortable truths under layers of carefully managed appearances. The creaking gears, the forgotten rooms, the malfunctioning machines all hint at a system that's breaking down behind the scenes. A metaphor for what happens when a story, no matter how sweet, starts to crumble under its own weight. The broken clocks scattered throughout the factory also play a subtle role in the film's visual language. These clocks appear in background shots, on shelves in old control rooms, often stopped at different times. They symbolize how time has stalled in this town, how people have stopped moving forward and questioning what they've always known. It's a quiet suggestion that the town has been stuck in the same comforting rhythm for years, ignoring the ticking that should have pulled them forward. When the clocks begin to move again toward the end of the story, it's not just about gears and machinery, it's about life finally moving past the old, frozen stories. Another recurring symbol is the use of sticky fingerprints. Max often leaves them on the glass jars, on factory buttons, on dusty surfaces. They seem like a small detail, but they visually track his presence, his influence, and his refusal to leave things untouched. It's a subtle way the film shows how curiosity physically leaves its mark. Max isn't just moving through this world. He's smudging it, changing it, forcing the clean, controlled environment to carry his questions and his fingerprints. The film also plays with the metaphor of sweetness. Candy, marshmallows, glowing syrups. all things that attract, comfort, and distract. But the more Max uncovers, the more the film teases that sweetness can be used to cover rot, to hide bitter truths, to sugarcoat things people would rather not confront. The factory's sweetness becomes both a lure and a mask, a surface-level delight that conceals what's broken underneath. It quietly asks the audience to think about the things in their own world that taste sweet, but may be hiding something else entirely. Even the lighting in the film carries symbolic weight. The soft, warm tones in the town feel safe, almost too safe, as if the world has been wrapped in a permanent sunset. But inside the factory, the lighting shifts. There are areas washed in harsh fluorescence, others bathed in the cool blue glow of the Marshmallow's trail. And these contrasts create a visual push and pull between comfort and the unknown. The light isn't just there to set the mood. It becomes a map of where the characters are emotionally, guiding the audience through their growing unease and discovery. All these layered symbols, marshmallows, jars, clocks, fingerprints, light, aren't loudly announced. They're tucked into the storytelling, waiting to be noticed by those who are curious enough to look. The film seems to deliberately reward viewers who lean in, who pay attention to the corners of the frame, who follow the sticky trail of metaphors it leaves behind. It builds a world where even the smallest detail might be saying something, where the sweet, playful surface is just the beginning of something much more quietly powerful. Marshmallow 2025 steps into its place as part of a loosely connected storytelling universe, a soft-spoken addition to a growing line of whimsical adventure films that don't scream for attention, but instead build a quiet, interconnected world. It doesn't feel like a direct sequel or a spin-off in the loud, heavily branded way that franchises usually push their next installment. Instead, it feels like a story that's been sitting quietly on the shelf of this universe, waiting for someone curious enough to dust it off. The film doesn't rely on heavy callbacks or big crossover moments, but if you've been paying attention to the smaller threads from earlier films by the same creative team, you'll spot the careful fingerprints of a larger story world unfolding in the background. There are subtle winks to previous films, small objects tucked in the corners of Max's house, an old candy wrapper with a barely visible logo from another familiar factory, a faded newspaper clipping about a town that seems just a little too strange to be unrelated. These aren't thrown in for fan service. They're quiet breadcrumbs that link Marshmallow 2025 to the broader world of these stories. It's the kind of connection that rewards those who've been paying close attention, but it never excludes new viewers. You can walk into this film with no prior knowledge and still get the full adventure, but if you know where to look, there's a whole extra layer that deepens the experience. The film plays with the idea that the marshmallows and the factory aren't a one-off phenomenon. The sense of lingering magic, the slightly offbeat rhythms of the town, and the undercurrent of long-held secrets suggest that this is just one small chapter in a much larger, interconnected web of stories. It feels like this universe has been quietly expanding with each film, not through grand announcements but through whispered connections and soft, shared details. This film adds weight to that growing world, not by shouting, "Look at me, I'm part of the franchise," but by quietly opening another door in a hallway we didn't know we were walking down. There's also a kind of historical layering at play within the story itself. The town feels like it's been frozen in time, and the factory carries the weight of decades, if not centuries, of carefully managed history. The old machinery, the forgotten rooms, the dusty records all build a sense that the story of the factory stretches much further back than Max's immediate adventure. The film leans into this with scattered hints, a name scrawled on an ancient blueprint, a broken machine built long before anyone can remember, a story passed down that's missing its ending. It makes the factory feel like a historical landmark, not in the grand sense of empires or revolutions, but in the quiet, local sense of a place that has quietly shaped the lives of everyone around it for generations. What makes this even more interesting is that the film never fully answers the question of where the marshmallows came from or how the factory's strange magic really works. It plants the idea that the marshmallows might not even be unique to this town, that there could be other places, other factories, other small pockets of magic hidden in plain sight. It leaves the door wide open for this story to be part of something much larger without ever needing to shout it. It feels like this story is part of a hidden history, a soft, sticky thread that connects to other adventures, other strange towns, other quiet rebellions. For fans who have followed earlier films in this storytelling web, the satisfaction comes in spotting the patterns, the recurring themes, the quiet echoes. For new audiences, the film stands comfortably on its own, but it also leaves a curious itch, a sense that there are other stories out there waiting to be found. It's a subtle expansion of a universe that trusts the audience to notice the soft connections, to follow the breadcrumbs, to realize that the world of Marshmallow 2025 doesn't end when the credits roll. There are more jars, more forgotten factories, more strange little towns with stories waiting to be unwrapped. Marshmallow 2025 arrived with a budget that sat in that fascinating middle ground. Not a sprawling blockbuster budget with endless resources, but definitely not a shoestring indie either. It lived in that sweet spot where the creative team had enough money to build something visually rich and emotionally textured, but not so much that they could throw CGI at every corner and drown the story in spectacle. What makes this film's budget especially interesting is how the filmmakers chose to spend it. Instead of chasing massive, effects-driven set pieces, the money went into building intricate, practical sets, designing the factory's labyrinthine corridors, and crafting the marshmallows with a blend of puppetry, practical props, and selective digital animation that kept them feeling grounded in the physical world. The result is a film that looks more expensive than it actually was, not because it's flashy, but because every corner feels carefully constructed, lived in, and full of detail that invites the eye to linger. The visual effects budget was handled with restraint. The digital touches, when they appear, blend so seamlessly with the physical sets that you almost forget you're watching effects at all. The marshmallows wobble, bounce, and pulse with a texture that feels tangible. And that's thanks to the smart use of hybrid effects that mix old-school charm with modern polish. The film never leans on giant, overblown action moments to justify its budget. Instead, it focuses on creating a world where the smallest visual cues carry weight, where the flicker of a forgotten light or the soft glow of a hidden room holds more cinematic punch than a CGI explosion ever could. When the film hit theaters, it didn't explode onto the box office charts with blockbuster force, but it performed in that quietly satisfying way that studios love to see from a film with a moderate budget. It didn't need to rake in hundreds of millions to be considered a win. It simply needed to connect with its audience, and that's exactly what it did. The opening weekend was steady, not spectacular, but the real surprise came in the following weeks. Word of mouth became the engine that pushed Marshmallow 2025 along. People who saw it started talking about it, not in the loud viral social media way, but in those quiet, sincere recommendations that make someone lean across a table and say, "You really should see this one." The marketing campaign was modest but clever. It didn't flood screens with overhyped trailers or massive billboard campaigns. Instead, it leaned into curiosity. Teasers focused on the marshmallows themselves, hinting at their strange, silent magic without revealing much about the story. Posters were simple, often just showing a single jar with one marshmallow pressed against the glass. The marketing trusted the audience to be intrigued by mystery, and that gamble paid off, especially as reviews started highlighting the film's depth and subtlety. Audiences who might have passed it by based on the candy-coated title started to realize this wasn't just a playful romp. It was something richer. Internationally, the film found surprising traction in markets that tend to embrace layered, emotionally driven stories. It wasn't a cultural juggernaut, but it traveled well, especially in places where audiences appreciate films that don't always wrap up their mysteries in neat packages. The steady earnings from international releases and streaming platforms helped push the film well past its budget, cementing its reputation as a financial success that grew steadily rather than peaking early. The real driver of its long-term success, though, came after its theatrical run. Once it landed on streaming platforms, Marshmallow 2025 found the kind of slow-burning second life that some films only dream of. Viewers who missed it in theaters discovered it later, and the film started popping up on lists of underrated gems and quietly brilliant family adventures. This continued audience engagement helped keep the conversation alive and drove additional revenue long after its box office window had closed. What makes the financial journey of Marshmallow 2025 so fascinating is how it proves that a carefully crafted story, a smartly balanced budget, and a creative approach to marketing can carry a film beyond simple opening weekend numbers. It didn't chase the biggest headlines, but it quietly became a success that matched its thoughtful tone and soft-spoken magic. Here's everything you need to know about where to watch Marshmallow 2025 and how to get the most out of it. It premiered in limited theaters on April 11, 2025 in the US, so if you caught it on the big screen back then, you joined a select experience. Releases.com. 1. The theatrical release was small, but the atmosphere in those cozy theaters, especially during the factory scenes and eerie campfire moments, really gave the film an immersive boost. After its time in theaters, Marshmallow hit digital platforms on June 6, 2025, Moviephone.com. 2. Now you can rent or buy it in HD on services like Apple TV, Fandango at Home, Plex, Google Play, and Spectrum on Demand, JustWatch.com. 3. Rentals typically go for around $6-7, while buying outright is roughly $14.99, JustWatch.com. 3. Best way to watch for full impact? Theater experience is ideal, especially for those who appreciate subtle sound design, tense lighting, and the collective audience reaction during surprises. If it's still playing near you, that's the top choice. Streaming/on-demand delivers the same crisp visuals and sound in HD, letting you enjoy cozy nights at home with full control and comfort. Plus, you can pause and absorb the layers of metaphor and quiet moments. There's currently no free streaming option, but you can set alerts on Just Watch or similar sites once it joins a subscription platform. To sum it up, big screen fans love the communal tension and atmosphere, while streaming viewers get the convenience and clarity to revisit and appreciate all the subtle details. Whichever route you choose, the story holds its charm. Just don't miss the Marshmallow's glowing and crisp HD if you can help it. 1. https://www.releases.com/p/marshmallow?UTM_source=chatgpt.com Marshmallow release dates. 2. https://movie.moviephone.com/movie/marshmallow/1q2cb_41/ where-UTM_source=UTM_source=sign-chatgpt.com Where to watch Marshmallow 2025. Moviephone. 3. https://www.justwatch.com/us/movie/marshmallow?UTM_source=sign-chatgpt.com Marshmallow streaming. Where to watch movie online. Just Watch.